Welcome everyone to our annual ACLS Member Showcase. This year it's being hosted by Paul Barribeau. So Paul, take it away.
Thanks, Pam. So the lineup tonight is as diverse as ACLS. We have 8 presenters who are all well-known amongst all of our members. And we have equal representation from all of the disciplines that are represented as well by the Association of Consultants for Liturgical Space. Our topic for the showcase is devotional and participatory art. Part of what we're looking at tonight, or actually all of what we're looking at tonight, is really how devotional art that we participate with changes us, how it has an impact, and the presenters are presenting art that had a profound impact on them. So with that, we'll start with our first presentation, which is by Julie Richey, an artist from Texas.
Okay, so and Paul, do you want to pull up the images? Okay, so this commission came to me through my website, and it was a very small committee, which was really nice to work with. It was just the priest and artist who was a parishioner, and then another woman who was a parishioner. And so we didn't have a lot of back and forth. We had never met the clients, my artist, designer and I, but we were approached to do this project, and it was just a really lovely relationship from the get-go. And this is for St. Daniel the Prophet in Wheaton, Illinois. And the artist who's on the committee, Elizabeth Roscom, had been in Texas visiting her daughter and started Googling and found a Texas artist who does mosaics. And unfortunately, we weren't able to meet while she was in Texas, but Father John Oper, who is the head of the parish there, goes on annual retreats to Mount Angel Abbey, which you all are familiar with. And I have a friend, Lynn Chin, who's done all of the seven sacraments icons there, and also a big, huge Annunciation mosaic there. So if you're familiar with that, and if you've seen those are by my friend Lynn. So Father John had been there on his annual retreat, and he sent me a picture of their Stations of the Cross, which were done maybe in the 70s by a female artist in mosaic, but a lot more kind of crude style, kind of found object, etc. So he sent me pictures of that and said, this is the inspiration. And so I said, we can do that, and we can do it even better because I can bring in this amazing friend of mine who's, he does a lot of liturgical art. I'm trying to get him to join ACLS. His name is Rex Care, and he teaches human figure anatomy. He has a master's from New York Academy of Art in Kansas City, and he was educated at the same university I was, University of Dallas. So I bring him in for a lot of my mosaic work that requires figurative drawing. And because this was requested to be so abstract and a little bit brutalist, we were able to be kind of free with it. And I wasn't forced to focus so much on the sfumatura and the painterly quality. It was more blocky with very severe black outlines and things. So it gave me a lot of freedom as a mosaic artist to not obsess too much about how the faces were looking. So Rex designed all of these. We did a series of meetings. What are the goals and aspirations of the parish? And they took a very unique approach, because if you notice in the third station where Christ falls for the first time, that silhouette of a building behind them is the silhouette of Saint Daniel the Prophet in Wheaton. They wanted an image that showed their parishioners on the journey, on the way with Christ. They wanted to be fully participatory with it. So I thought it was kind of a unique approach where they took lots of photographs of the building and sent those to us, and they showed us the interior. And it was very bland. They'd never had any stations. They have 2 or 3 white sculptures, but that is it. And so we were working with kind of a blank canvas. So I delivered these one at a time. Each time I finished one, I boxed it up and shipped it, and they hung it. So it was really kind of interesting. I just sent them a French cleat with each one of these frames, and they had a custodian put them in. And so every time I sent one, I got messages back, not just from Father John and the committee, but from random parishioners who found me on my website and wrote and said, "Thank you so much. We are really enjoying them and it's helping our journey." These were such positive clients. We got a ton of feedback. So what was interesting about the process and Rex's process is that as we designed these things, we kept cropping in tighter and tighter and tighter onto the image. So when we actually met these people at the parish, we went up there in February and did kind of a dog and pony and met with them and went to mass with them and did a slideshow and showed the parishioners how this whole project came together. And actually we're now in the process of starting to design 2 angels for their tabernacle. But as we showed them a slideshow of how the designs were developed, we showed them the before and the after. And for example, Paul, maybe you can go to the next page. I don't know if it's on there. Do we have all of the stations? There we go. So the image, the second image there where you see Christ's feet nailed to the cross, when Rex started designing that one, he had a hand and he had a hammer and there was more going on in the image. And every time we looked at these and decided what we were going to do, we cropped in and I said, for example, on this one, we all know the story. We all know he was nailed to the cross. We don't need to see a hand and a hammer. It doesn't need to be that literal. So we really edited out so much of what you see in a traditional Station of the Cross, where you see all these undulating people and all these body, and it's very Baroque, and there are 7 people in the image. They did not want that. They just wanted the crux of what's happening in the story of that particular station. So you notice that they're very minimal. And that was just by design. So the one that was hardest to come up with the final design was the final Station 14, where Jesus is laid in the tomb, because we went back and forth between, is he alone in the tomb or are there people attending him in the tomb? And the image of him alone in the tomb, actually his head was facing the other direction and you could see stairs leading out of the tomb, and it was a beautiful, beautiful image. But we decided that he shouldn't be alone, that wasn't the most impactful, emotional moment of the story. And so Rex edited it to put the mourners there with him. So, and you can see in the picture above, there's Rex setting up a tripod to take photos, and they look very tiny in the space because they're only 16 by 20 inches. But because there are 14 of them and they've spaced them in a circular pattern all the way around the sanctuary, it works because they're slightly above people's head level, which means when they do, as a group, they do the Stations of the Cross, everyone can see the imagery, but they're not so low that people are touching them or we're worried about how sharp they are or whatever. So that's it. They're all Italian smalty, and they're just made in angle iron frames that were, bronzed, antique bronzed and treated. So they're very simplistic, very minimalist, kind of like the style of that parish.
Thanks so much, Julie.
You're welcome.
Our next presenter is Ken Griesemer.
All right, thank you, Paul. Go to the first image. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Church of St. Mary in Melrose, Minnesota, and a project I worked on a number of years ago. And the original church was dedicated in 1898, and tragically in March of 2016 there was a fire, and the fire gutted the interior of the church, but the structure remained. And there was a tremendous amount of water damage to the building, and the building was already in need of some repairs, and so they ended up having to figure out, what they were going to do. And I was interviewed for the liturgical design consulting position in mid-April of 2017, and for that whole year they were sort of going back and forth on what they might do to, repair the existing church or build a new one. And the community was very divided between those two options. And the bishop weighed in, and after some investigation of the historic structure, the decision was made that it had to be torn down and a new church had to be built. And that was a very unpopular decision by the bishop, and a lot of anger in the community. So there was a lot of hurt, a lot of pain from the loss, but also this whole anger and division thing that they experienced together. Next slide. Now, this parish was comprised of what I would describe as longtime members of German heritage, about 75%. So the overwhelming kind of population of the parish was German descent. And being of German descent myself, I got along with them pretty well. 25% of the parish members were recent immigrants from Mexico, and they all kind of came from the same part of Mexico, and they came for jobs. And as is typical, families tell family members and friends, and more people were coming. And the Spanish-speaking members of the parish were very strong in their sense of community and ownership and service and celebration, and really a very vibrant part of the parish. And a lot of the old German members just didn't quite not know what to do with all this energy. However, even with this energy that they had, the building process itself was led primarily by the Anglos, almost entirely by the Anglo members of the parish. And when I got there, I tried to advocate for Spanish language components in the parish. So translation of materials and some separate project meetings. We made multiple requests for input and people to attend. And we had some bilingual people that were able to help build bridges. I did some presentations after some of the masses. The masses were in Spanish, and I had to be translated because I don't speak Spanish very well at all. And then what was very important is we conducted a few small meetings with parish leaders, community leaders, Spanish-speaking community leaders, and that was very fruitful. They were able to really speak their mind, and we really tried to listen to them very well and have good conversation. They had wonderful input. Now, when it came to the artwork, the Germans were very fixed on a very traditional German image of Mary. And the Mexicans were very fixed on an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. But what I observed is they weren't talking to each other. There were these separate things going on, and they weren't hearing each other. So next slide. So I proposed that partway through this process, I proposed this bilingual meeting with translation, simultaneous translation, to tell stories and to share faith and to listen to each other. And we prayed, and I started with a kind of a presentation that was introductory, kind of talking about enculturation and some of my own experiences in Mexico, just to kind of build a little more credibility with the participants there. And then we asked 3 Spanish-speaking members of the parish and 3 English-speaking members of the parish to kind of present their spirituality around Mary, around the Blessed Mother. And what ended up happening was that the first gentleman who spoke in English, 80 some years old, spoke passionately about how much Our Lady of Guadalupe meant to him. And then the first Spanish speaking member of the parish came up and spoke beautifully about his own personal devotion to the Blessed Mother. And he never used the term Our Lady of Guadalupe. He just talked about the Blessed Mother. And these 2 groups of people who didn't interact very much started hearing each other and hearing the language they were using and how the spirituality was very much in common and shared. And it really had quite an effect. And many of us were moved to tears that night, me included. We didn't expect this to happen. We had no idea what was actually going to happen. And they weren't coached on what to say other than just share your story. And so it turned out to be a really wonderful and kind of groundbreaking evening in the whole process. Next slide. So in conversation with the building committee, I started thinking about developing a custom image that would bring together both a traditional image of Mary and the Our Lady of Guadalupe language, if you will. And I did some research, and I thought my friend Johannes Albel in Germany might have some ideas for me and point me in the direction of some historic images and sources. And so I started seeing possibilities. When I was looking at some of these images, I thought, wow, there's a possibility here of creating a new image that would be a combination of Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Virgin of Mercy, which is this, sheltering cloak Madonna with people in the community sheltered there under the cloak. And I saw this as a response to kind of the need for mercy and bringing people together and sort of creating a new feeling as part of this process and healing some of these divisions that had come from the fire. Next slide. So Alba of Oberammergau was selected to do the image, and they did sketches as they typically do, a process of going back and forth, and modifications were made. They sent progress photos, which were received with great interest by the parish. And then the final image there on the right, which includes the people that they were asked to kind of represent people of various cultures in the parish underneath the sheltering cloak. And so the stance of Mary is very much that of Our Lady of Guadalupe. The rays are there, and that's what ended up happening as a result of this process. And
And
next
we are
slide.
at 7 minutes.
Okay, I only have just very quickly to say the image is in a primary spot. It's next to the crucifix, which has some relationship to the historic building. And the last slide is the shrine itself close up. So you can see the image in its location there. And it turned out pretty well. They're still working to come together, but this took a great step forward. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Ken. Our next presenter is Paul May, an architect from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Thank you, Paul. We can jump right in. This is, in my view, very participatory art. This is the International Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, otherwise known as Yad Vashem. And Yad Vashem comes from Isaiah 56, verse 5. It says, I will make within my walls a memorial and a name. Next slide. This is the 45-acre memorial outside. It's within this near Mount Herzl in Jerusalem. And the particular image that I will be showing is number 24, which was part of this, and it's a whole site. You can't see this whole memorial in a day. It takes 2 or 3 days to go through it. Next slide. But this is the memorial, which is a railroad car taken from Poland that was used to transport Jews from Poland to one of the many death camps. And the architect of this particular sculpture or memorial is Moshe Safdie, who is a Canadian and an Israeli architect. And this memorial was built in 1995, this part. And Yad Vashem is a living memorial. They are constantly adding elements to it. And it is, it's very, very interactive. So with here, next slide, you can see it is a rail car that is at the end of the tracks. And it's up in the air almost 60 to 70 feet, and it terminates as if it were to its next rotation of the tires of the rail would take you over the edge. Next slide. In Judaism, when you visit the grave of a loved one, you bring a stone and you set it at the grave, and it is to remember that you have been there. Stones are very powerful elements. They carry energy and they carry living memory. And you can see here at the base of the trestle, or that, just thousands of stones that people have come and placed there. And when you visit, you just think of all of the relatives and of the members throughout the Holocaust that are being represented here by the stones that people have brought. Next slide. From the top, this is, you can see the rail car, which is just really suspended in the earth, or suspended in the air. Next slide. And yet when you go to the end, again, you see it, the rail car going off into infinity, and very, very powerful. And the next slide, this is at Yad Vashem, right at next to where that previous slide was, engraved in the stone wall in the and it was said this was written in pencil in the very rail car that you see there, in the sealed rail car. And this was written in pencil, and it says, here in this carload, it said, I am Eve with Abel my son. And if you see my other son, Cain, son of man, tell him and then it trails off and there's nothing left. And you just sit and ponder about this particular verse and what man does to each other. And it was just very, very powerful for me. And I'm done.
Thank you so much, Paul. Next up is Peggy Parker. Take it away, Peggy.
First slide, please. Looking at this first slide, which has one of Elizabeth Devereux's windows for the Cistercian Abbey of New Clairvaux in Vina, California, you'll understand why I titled this short presentation, A Hymn to the Light. The intense California sunlight is caught and muted by the glass, illuminating the colors in the long, narrow window, casting shafts of light across the stone window frame, spilling out across the floor. Devereux has captured in her windows one of the essences of Cistercian spirituality. St. Bernard of Clairvaux, which means Valley of Light, wrote, "The soul must seek light by following the light." I was privileged to serve on the Faith and Form Architecture and Art Awards jury that gave Devereux's project an honor award. From the first moment, her windows seized my heart and imagination, and I hope to do them justice. Next slide. Some of you may know a book called The Architecture of Truth by Lucien Hervé, a volume of immensely beautiful and deeply spiritual photos of Le Thoronay, which is shown on the left, a 12th century Cistercian abbey in the south of France. In the book's introduction, Le Corbusier calls this the architecture of truth, tranquility, and strength. Elizabeth Devereux's stained glass for Our Lady of New Clairvaux stand in that same tradition. Their quiet perfection complements the simplicity of the new abbey, pictured on the right, which is constructed from the stones of a derelict 12th century Cistercian monastery in northern Spain. The stones, purchased by publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, lay unused for years behind the De Young Museum in San Francisco. They were eventually salvaged to construct New Clairvaux with assistance from architectural historians and from German stonemasons who carved new stones to replace those that were unusable. Together, the stones and stained glass embody the simplicity and austerity that St. Bernard envisioned as a means towards silent and prayerful contemplation. The abbot of New Clairvaux at the time, Father Thomas Davis, wrote, "Cistercian architecture uses a combination of proportion, form, space, and light that fosters pure contemplative prayer. Its spacious, simple design promotes the simplicity and stillness in which a monk sees a distant reflection of the simplicity and stillness of the divine." Next slide. Devereux brought her own deep spirituality and her Cistercian love of light to this commission. She first visited the abbey on a spiritual retreat, and since she lived and worked in nearby Chico, she knew the abbey well before being offered the commission. The abbot said they never considered anyone else. She prepared for the commission by visiting 3 of the great Cistercian abbeys in Europe, Le Thoronay among them. And in meetings with the planning committee, she asked the monks what held meaning for them, reflecting with them on St. Bernard's words about sight. The windows that Devereux created echo, in a modern idiom, the abstract simplicity of design and color of medieval Cistercian windows, which were often executed in soft amber and clear glass. Devereux's windows offer a radiant expression of divine light and surely fulfilled the monks' highest expectations. Next slide. Here in the prayer room, with the entry doors shown to the left, the windows are wider but feature the same motif we see in the narrower chapel windows, rising twists of beveled glass that seem to embody the words of Psalm 141, "Let my prayer be incense before you, my uplifted hands an evening offering." Since these windows face due west and are exposed to the hot afternoon sun, Devereux occluded the glare with opal glass. The windows are slightly opaque at the bottom, their opacity increasing toward the top. Next slide. While these contemporary Cistercian windows may appear simple, their fabrication is complex. Besides inserting clear beveled glass and varying the window's opacity, Devereux employed 24-karat gold luster, which is visually active throughout the day and night in the background pattern. The luster is liquid when applied, but after firing, only the gold remains. Next slide. Devereux planned for the windows to speak visually at all times of day, since the monks worship both day and night. Here we see the windows at night, glimpsing the darkened sky through the glass. The chapel is adorned for the feast of the Incarnation, and we are reminded of St. Bernard's words, "Was it not by the light of Jesus' name that God called us into his admirable light? Wherewith being enlightened, and in this light, small l, seeing the light, capital L, we take these words of Paul as truly addressed to ourselves. Heretofore you were darkness, but now light in the Lord." Next slide. And here the chapel in daylight, a space of silence and mystery illumined by the light of the windows. So it seems apt to end with the words of another 12th century Cistercian abbot, Gilbert of Hoyland, who was asked after St. Bernard's death to take up his monumental but unfinished series of sermons on the Song of Songs. Gilbert wrote, "This silence and this simplicity are what provide us with the opportunity for transforming ourselves, going from light to light in the very image of the Lord." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peggy. And thank you, Elizabeth, too, for your craft. Next, we have Gilbert Sunghera. Gilbert?
Yes, and thank you. First slide. So the question that I'm raising is the multiple use of the images of Mary. I was typically trained to avoid duplicating images because of a loss of the power of the symbol. However, specific images of Mary are specific to devotional groups. And I found this problem, or ran into this problem, at St. Joseph the Worker Parish in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which I would describe as a multicultural Hispanic community, meaning these were folks that came from various Spanish-speaking countries, including Mexico, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Honduras, and several others. Each group of Hispanics arrived with their own statue of Mary. In their previous church, each group was given a side altar to display their devotional images. Different Mass times represented different groups, which all had different pietistic practices. In the new church, the desire was to limit the number of services by having a large enough space where they can all gather. Next slide. Next. Yes, and so just to make a distinction, I use devotional imagery in contrast to liturgical or religious art by indicating it's the kind of art that you would light a candle in front of. Prayers are said, and these devotional statues become moments of intercessory prayer, a transcendence from this world to the divine. And this would be in contrast of the liturgical actions taking place. such as the tapestries of the Communion of Saints by the LA Cathedral, or the Stations of the Cross, or seasonal art or decorative stenciling that draws focus to the liturgical centers of the altar, the ambo, the presider's chair. And then I would describe religious art, which leads to deeper meaning in the viewer. So it might be figural or abstract, and it could be stories related in stained glass window, whether they're figural or, again, abstract. And they need to support the liturgical function, but are not necessarily accenting them. And they're used at times for private prayer in liturgical spaces. And that distinction comes from Jaime Lera at Yale. Next slide. When I met with the group, again, it was multicultural Hispanic, so all Spanish speakers, but again, a very different pietistic background. The Design Advisory Committee defined the parish as a gateway parish, which meant that it's a pass-through, that recent immigrants arrive, they stabilize, and then they move on. And they recognized that service for the larger church community. And so these statues that came with each immigrant wave needed to be not just about their intercessory power, but also to capture the historic journeys of the groups that undertook them. So they needed to be housed not in separate shrines, but as a group so that a single community could be formed. So again, that was kind of from this project statement. Next slide. So the original church was too small for this growing Hispanic population, initially constructed at the turn of the last century by German immigrants. These devotional statues were each given separate side altars, which ran along the side walls of this very small church, which maybe sat about 50 people. They needed something that could seat between 400 to 500. Now, some of the altars were getting more attention than others, leading to friction in the community. So the growing congregation needed to expand. However, their fundraising capacity was minimal. They were basically selling tacos after Mass. The bishop happened to see a former Dutch Reformed church that was for sale. He bought it and gave it to the parish. It was within a few blocks from this current place. And in the movement, the procession to the new place, all those statues were carried by hand by the parishioners to the location. You can see in the small insert picture, it's now used as kind of an arts center for the city of Grand Rapids. Next slide. Now, most of these statues varied in size and were of not the greatest quality. They were historic figures, so replacing them was not an option. And we even asked an artist if they could try touching up the statues to bring a more uniform color palette to them, since we were going to present them in a collection. But even that intervention proved too costly. Next slide. So we created a Raredos, which was actually not a new approach. It's actually more of an older approach. Behind the main altar in ambo, which sits on an oval platform, and then the space between that platform and the Raredos wall is actually where the musicians stand, and each musical group from each different country was varied in size. That low wall provided space for candles, and then the pinch point towards the back right had a wider shelf so the flowers could be left. Now, what was nice is that groups would gather after Mass and then leave flowers and light candles and say short prayers, but it was never obvious which group was leaving flowers and candles for which image of Mary, which then helped to build a sense of community. Now, the statues were front and center behind the altar and the ambo, so during the Mass, the focus was still on the Eucharistic celebration. we discovered that the juxtaposition of the crucifix in front of these statues was powerful because it reminded everyone about the difficult journeys those community members had taken. Next slide. So in this later picture, you can see that all the niches now are filled. And unfortunately, a print of a traditional Guadalupe sits on the side at the pinch point where the flowers are to be left. Originally, that location was set aside so that on a feast day, the actual image of that Mary could be brought down and then celebrated there. But now one community has started dominating the space. And this kind of happened as the pastors moved on. And so we found ourselves kind of at the end of all this, kind of wondering, is this the right approach? Is using varied images of Mary, again, not beautiful artistic expressions of Mary, but meaningful ones, still devotional? Or is it simply now shifted to more of a religious art? Though people still light candles and leave flowers for it. And
Thank
that's
you
the
very
end.
much, Gilbert. Our next presenter is Todd Dvorak, architect from Appleton, Wisconsin.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me tonight. When Paul asked me to do a presentation, I probably don't have the same level of artistic talents as many of you, but one of the blessings I've had over the last several years is to be able to travel to Europe and France, and one of the spaces that left a mark on my travels is the Notre Dame Cathedral in Chartres, France. Chartres is technically how the call the city. And tonight I want to focus on the choir wall, which is a beautiful piece of artwork that wraps around the choir at Chartres, and it is not original to the building. So we'll maybe just talk a little bit about it. Chartres, for us architects, is one of the best examples of Gothic architecture. Almost 100% of the building is original. It used a stone that is extremely durable and is found only 10 kilometers away from the city center. 80% of the stained glass is original, and 90% of the sculptures have been able to be conserved and restored. So it's a phenomenal example of Gothic architecture. This building was built in 25 years, which is lightning fast compared to most cathedrals of that era, which might have a 150 plus year speed. So for us architects, it's really one of the pinnacles of Gothic architecture. Next slide, please. So the floor plan is a typical transept. The two towers on the west predate the main body of the church. They were built from the year 1120 to 1194, and then a fire happened, which of course happened to just about all cathedrals in France. But they were able to be preserved, and then a new building was built over the old crypts. The choir wall, there was a wall there before. It was made out of wood. The bishop and the priests complained of two things. One, that it was too noisy, that they didn't have enough quiet space to pray. But also, I think there were some comments I read about how it was too drafty, and so adding the wall would help maybe keep some of the heat and less draft moving through. So they decided to fund this wall. The wall began construction in the year 1516 and took 200 years to complete. I hope we can jump to the next slide, please. So it took nearly 200 years. Interestingly enough, the first 12 panels and the last 8 panels were done within the first 2 years. The remaining panels took the remaining 190-ish years to complete. But the choir wall is broken up into 15 sections, and then within those sections there are 40 scenes. So some sections might have just 2, many of them have 4 scenes within each section, and the section is based upon the structural the structural columns as it wraps around. What you see here is it's a consistent 4 layers. You have a base, the clear story, which is almost kind of an open webbing. the niches, which is where the actual imagery is, and then the crown. The crown is made out of a Tonneray stone. The Vernon and Saint Loup stone is what's made for most of the rest of the architecture. Again, 6 meters tall. What you see here is 6 meters tall, 100 meters long as it wraps around. Starts on the south end and works its way counterclockwise in chronological order. There's also an astronomical clock that was added in 1528, just kind of an oddity along the way. You jump to the next slide. The focus on the niches is very much focused on Mary and Christ's life, and then Christ's crucifixion. So, and I'm not going to go through all 40 of them, but just to give you kind of a feel for the start of it here, we've got in section 1 and scene 1, and that's how they label these as you work around the 40 scenes. We have the Annunciation to Mary's parents. So Joachim and Anne, they are the ones that are receiving this information about the Virgin Mary coming. Very similar to the story of other folks from the Old Testament, where you have a father and a mother that are past childbearing age. The same thing to Mary's parents. They also were not of childbearing age at that time anymore, but did have Mary. If we jump to the next slide, again, the thing that amazes me about these scenes is the depth. They are this wall is not very deep. It's only a few feet deep, but yet with the sculpture using perspective and depth perception, you feel a depth on these images that you normally just can't find. I mean, these were truly master craftsmen, and the level of detail that they show is, in my mind, amazing. Just to give you a few highlights of some of my more favorite ones, we have on the left side there the marriage of Joseph and Mary, and then on the right is the nativity of Jesus. And just looking at the imagery of the animals and the people coming to celebrate, I find it amazing. I find the depth of it amazing. You can see on the left side, just kind of as we go through the slides, those are each scene and each section. Jump to the next tab. So sections 4, 5, and 6, the massacre of innocents on the right. Obviously, this is when Jesus, Mary, and Joseph fled to Egypt, and just the gruesomeness of the scene is just, it's amazing to feel what murder must feel like, right? I mean, you kind of feel the anger and the hatred that's coming out in that scene, the swords, the movement, the body language. And then in just a few scenes later, you see an amazing scene of the Transfiguration and trying to lift Christ above the disciples and to show again movement of him rising from the ground. So that's another thing that amazes me about the choir panels is the movement that they can capture with the sculpture and the level of details and people and images in each scene. We can jump to the next. So here again, a couple scenes during Christ's Passion. So on the right is Jesus in the garden. You can see the angels that are there to assist. And in the far background, you can see disciples nodding off, falling asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane. And again, using that depth, it seems like they are a far, far away. But obviously, based on the panel, we're only a couple of feet away. But by using depth and perspective and things like that, it's amazing how you can get a richness of depth and how you can see it differently from different angles. The image on the left, of course, is Christ being arrested and being betrayed. And yet, I believe that's Judas leaning in for the one final kiss. He's got a bag of coins, it appears, on his off his belt there, and the guards are ready. The Roman guards are ready to take him away. So,
and we're at 7 minutes. Todd?
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, a
No
couple more.
problem.
Just the raising of the cross on the left side. That's a double scene, which is rare. It's the only real double scene they have. On the right side, you've got the Mary's confronting the angel that Christ has left the tomb. Next slide. And then kind of to finish it off, we've got the adoration of the cross. One thing that I thought was very interesting here is the old man, the skull of Adam is at the base of that cross. And then on the left, again, the burial of the Virgin Mary. And again, I just thought the composition of the multiple people and carrying the casket and the depth was just very impressive. So yeah, thank you very much for letting me share.
Thank you, Todd. Our next presenter is Lisa Bierer, an artist from Minnesota.
Hello, thank you for asking me or letting me do this. So the first two pictures are going to be from Lumen Christi Parish in St. Paul. They had a call for art to kind of address their huge loss during COVID. They lost more than 45 people. And so my daughter and I worked, this is my daughter, worked on, and we got the call. And so we decided to make a place where they could stand and pray. And then we also, and that's made out of Tyvek. We painted it, cut some slits through it. Lumen Christi has tons of glass work done, very beautiful. You can go to the next slide. And then the next, this was representing the collaborative work we did with the parish, they came after Sunday Mass and stayed for maybe 3 hours, painted these wooden tiles, did maybe 400, maybe 450, and then we stacked them and glued them and sprayed them nice and shiny, and now it's on the back of their chapel wall, which is open and visible to the sanctuary. And what affected me so much with this was they had a purpose. They definitely went after what they wanted. We had to change some of the canopy design because they had asbestos in the ceiling that they didn't realize they had. So we couldn't do the first thing we had, but it still provided a separate place for them to pray for their people. And I guess people use it all the time, and it's happy. It's not sad, but it does give them honor. So, okay, next slide. The rest of them have to do with taking commissions from Johann von Pars that everybody knows, and how much fun that is. And the first, this is one of 3 54 feet by 5 feet Tyvek banners that I did, which he didn't even ask for a design. He didn't ask for anything. It was just like open to me, and it all worked out fine. Next. And then he also asked for, they have in the basilica, they have this huge structure that can hold a giant Advent wreath or like an installation sculpture or anything. So anyway, this is for Pentecost. And so I reverse painted on acrylic sheets. And you can go to the next page. And then hung them, each strip is like 10 feet long, and I just had to fill it in. And this is the 3rd year it'll be up, and I've added and taken, kind of changed it up every year. So next one. And then the last thing I did for him was, or for the basilica was last year, the new creation season. And so that is a painting collage that's up there. But what I would like to say is that when you work with someone, or when I feel like I become part of their church or their group, their community. I pray for them. They pray for me. We do research, or they give me their favorite things, their colors, what they love. And it's just been a really huge building of depth for me in my spirit. They're just so wonderful to work with these and help people's ideas come to fruition. And I just really appreciate that. And through meeting Carol Frenning and Johan, I was part of their certification program at St. John's University a couple of years ago, and that's how I met them. So and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And our final presenter is Robert Habiger. Many of us know Robert.
Thank you, Paul. And it is wonderful to see so many people that I know, but I haven't seen or talked to for such a long time. So it's nice to have you all here. This project, Santa Maria de la Vid Church, is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This community is celebrating their 40th year here in Albuquerque, out of 901 years for the Norbertines themselves. A little bit of tidbit. Ken Griesemer helped me with this project. Ken came to work for me in 1996, and this church was built in 1998. You can see it's kind of Southwestern style. Today, I want to focus not just on one devotional piece of art, statue, but also just the process that the community went through. Go ahead, Paul. They created a list of statues that they wanted to have in this new church. The devotional statues, the risen Christ was going to be an outside small statue that's part of the journey from public space to private space. The pregnant Virgin was to be in their gathering space. And then the Madonna and Child, Saints Augustine and Norbert, St. John the Baptist, and St. Mary Magdalene was to be in their church itself. And the picture shows you the inside of the church, and you can see two of the statues. There's 4 statues in each corner of the place. But this concept of a place for spiritual beauty came from the community, and their sense of a vision that they were wedding the arts and Christian spirituality, and that was their purpose for doing these sculptures. Go ahead, Paul. They developed a set of criteria for each artist to follow. The purpose, the overall, was to evoke a prayerful awe, reverence, wonder for the viewer. The energy of each statue was to be dynamic, that is not static or self-contained, but animated by a faith energy coming from inside out, which reaches beyond itself and communicates itself immediately to the viewer. The face of each statue was not to be a pious, stereotypical face of a saint, but was to be unique and a privileged channel for communicating the inside-out dimension embodied in this work. In being self-efficating was of importance in that the statue was not to draw attention to itself, but to point beyond itself to the mystery which it embodies. And the creative fidelity to this place was important to animate the architecture of the church and to express the religious tradition and feel of the Norbertine community. And then in terms of statue proportion, it was felt that both tradition and the nature of the spaces where the shrines were going to be located suggested that a somewhat elongated figure would be appropriate. All this came from Father Fran Dorff, and I was reading this because I got this information from Abbot Joel this week, and to make sure that I communicated this correctly. These are meaningful, articulated, really criteria that the artists need to follow. And I think we had 4, maybe 5 different artists, but they were asked to communicate with each other. Go ahead, Paul, for these projects. Father Fran developed this diagram, and he saw this with the 4 statues in the worship space as creating this dynamic relationship between statue, or the understanding of what that statue was about, and the place itself for worship. And you start in the center with sacramental, go to the communal aspects, the personal aspects, and then the biblical. And I think that anybody that's been in that space has that sense that these statues are there with you. And it's like we've always talked about the communion of saints gathered with us in worship. Go ahead, Paul. The pregnant virgin also goes by the name Santa Maria de la Vid, or Our Lady of the Vine. And that is also the name of the abbey, as well as in a sense, their namesake for the community. The statue has the title of Magnificat, or My Soul Glorifies the Lord, which comes from Luke 1, verse, I think it's verse from 46, I believe. There it seems we've been in the middle of that setting. The communal vision that they had was to have a young, visibly pregnant, but also a young woman that had radiating of the joy and wonder and carrying a basket of grapes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Go ahead, Paul. In the statue development steps, the middle picture is the artist, Susan Vertal, and she resided in Santa Fe, New Mexico then. I think she still does. And then you see Father Frandorf, and this is in the studio, the artist studio, with the clay sculptor and you can see the proportionality of the statue in relationship to both Susan and Father Fran. And when you're in the space, you don't feel that necessarily that they're elongated. It's like what Father Fran understood, that it needed to happen for the architecture. Of course, Susan created a maquette for the community to approve before she went into the clay sculpture. And then the picture on the right just shows that I wanted to include this because Shidoni Foundry is one of the premier foundries in New Mexico. I think a lot of people probably knows about it. For that last slide. The engagement of the statue happens because it's in the gathering space, but it also happens because of these features. Not only is the statue in a space that allows everybody to move around it and to it, but there's also this other piece of art that was developed, fabric art, that's called Dawn. And you can see in the middle image, the sense of sunset rays that come around the statue, particularly when you're at the font to bless yourself before you move into the worship space. And this is a pregnant Mary at the time of going to Elizabeth, not a full, long-term, you're not in full-term pregnancy. And you can see the grapes gives both that sense of humbleness of working in a vineyard, but also the foreshadowing that Christ is going to be the vine for all of us. And I like the bare feet because it really senses of connectedness to the earth and to this space. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to stop the share, and this is a time when our community can talk to each other about what we've seen and interact with the people that brought these phenomenal images to this group tonight. So feel free to turn on your camera and microphone if you want to ask a question, make a comment, or engage with the full community.
I have a question for Paul May. Paul, when were you at that museum?
Yad Vashem, I've been there twice, 2011 and then 2017. And the first time I went only inside the museum, and it took me a whole day. So then I went the second time, I did all of the grounds. And so those images were taken in 2017.
Thank you. I've always wanted to be there. I've seen images and things about it, but I was wondering if you were there before the current events that have happening. So thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Can I ask a question to follow up, because I've also got a question of Paul.
I just wanted to say, Paul, when I saw these slides, I was in Jerusalem in '88, I think, and it really makes me want to go back.
Mhm.
More
Yeah.
than anything. I mean, not that it's not a bad place to visit, but it's compelling enough. It really makes me want to make a special visit.
And
Just to
and there's
see
the
that.
Garden of the Righteous, which is really another part of it that you can walk through, and it's both contemplative. There are places that are very quiet and solemn, and then there are places that are quite active. And most memorials, and I call it a living memorial as opposed to a museum, because it is interactive and it's living, and it not only looks backward, but it teaches you to look forward. And so that's really enjoyable.
Go ahead,
Peggy?
Peggy.
So my question, I have a student who's got a Jewish heritage. She will be ordained in the Episcopal Church. And she was in Lublin in Germany at a Holocaust memorial. And she said she couldn't understand, and she traveled extensively in Germany. She said it was very abstract, and she couldn't understand what it meant. And only after she read a text by the artist about how it expresses the Holocaust, then she understood it. And so her question was, and my question for you is, you know, where does a memorial, where do you come down? I mean, if it's so if the concept is so hidden in the artist's brain that it's not obvious to a person without the explanation, that's one end, and the other end is something that is so literal. So what is your feeling, having spent a lot of time? I mean, I've been at Yad Vashem, but not recently, and I did not see that particular part of it. But what is your feeling about it? How a memorial will be, how it can be accessible and yet reach people for decades, so that it's not in one particular time.
Boy, there's a lot of answers to that.
Right.
But I think it's 45 acres, and there is so many interpretations, and some are very literal, as you said, and some are quiet and contemplative, and you let your spirit talk to receive what's there. And I think each of us find a place that is impactful. It's like going through any church. Some like to be out in the middle of everything in the active, and some like to be on the edge. And some, this had no words on it other than the one inscription that was found inside, and yet some personal experience. And I've been to a lot of memorials and museums all over the world, Holocaust museums, and this one is the most impactful for me, at least, as well.
Have you seen the Stoppelstein, the stones that you walk on that have the names of people?
Yeah, the ones that were formerly, well, there are the ones that were formerly headstones.
No, they're little brass plaques. They're
Oh,
about this.
okay.
They're outside the houses where people were arrested, and there's some in Italy and there's some in Germany that I know of. So anyway, well, that's interesting because what you're saying is Yad Vashem is so huge that it can have a lot of different kinds,
Yeah,
as opposed to a small one somewhere is probably
it's
harder.
built and unbuilt. It's natural. There's landscape. There's other things like that.
Thank you.
Really interesting a question, Peggy, because I think with architecture and with art in general, and maybe this is true of liturgical consulting too, on how we arrange space for liturgy. I think there's always a first impression, and the stuff that really has depth. I mean, I think about what Robert presented, most of which nobody walking in that space would understand all of the background that came from the owner, or the stuff that Lisa presented, those images on the wall that people made. But I think that's what's really beautiful about a lot of our art that has depth and meaning, that the longer you spend with it, the longer time you spend with it, the more you start to uncover. And particularly when you have something like Lisa was talking about, where it's created by people. some of whom are still there, I'm assuming, and it draws you into that community beyond just the art, because the creators of it are actually still present.
Paul?
Yes, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I want to comment and question for Lisa. I thought that the installation that you did in the corner, that was the place of prayer for people lost during the pandemic, I thought that was very skillfully done, because it wasn't just art on the wall. You created a place by the use of the canopy. And I even thought that the curve on the frontal part of that made it more inviting in some way. And I just wondered how that concept generated to create more of a place than just something on the wall.
Do I have a microphone? Like,
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
okay, I was like, I don't know, can't tell. It was really neat, and we were gonna do a cocoon thing and then have a pad where when you stepped on a light would come on and shine down on the book of people who had died, and none of that worked because of the asbestos. And so we just kind of had to do something fast. And I think it just came because we prayed. So yeah, and it felt natural, and I wanted a little canopy. And I guess people use it still. So I don't know how long that kind of grieving and honoring will need to go on, but it's there right now.
Thanks. Beautiful.
I'll tell you, Lisa, what struck me when I saw that image, apart from the canopy, which you notice right away, is also how the bottom of the tapestry puddles kind of onto the stand in front of it. And, you know, it's so often you see things that look ordered. And of course, this is capturing some of the disorder of life in the art itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Thank
and I don't know if any of you who work in Minnesota have heard this little tidbit, but I was born in Minneapolis. I'm a big Lake Wobegon fan. And I don't know it, but at one point when Garrison Keillor had his talk show or his presentations about Lake Wobegon, someone took the time to do a very unscientific study of all the elements of Lake Wobegon, and they said, well, if it actually did exist, it would be exactly right in the middle of Stearns County, Minnesota. So everything you hear on Lake Wobegon, if you're a fan, is happening right there. That's where I grew up, going to my parents' cabin and going to St. John's Abbey for church. So it hit me as like, well, all these stories that you hear about Minnesotans and their ways, located in the geographic center where you were.
They talk very proudly about all that.
Yeah, sure, you betcha.
Where all the children are above average. The men are strong, the women are something, and all the children are above average. The logo is.
I don't know, can I speak now?
Yes, go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just wanted to say to Todd that I actually got to know Malcolm Miller, who was the person who gave talks at Chartres Cathedral. And my son and I visited him on the summer solstice, 21st of June, and we just accidentally did that and looked at the entry, the gathering space of the church, and said, what are all of those people walking in circles for? And he said, those are the Druids. This was a Druid sacred site before it became a Catholic church. And they come back every year to walk the labyrinth. And that's what they were doing. And I thought it was a fascinating thing, such a beautiful cathedral.
Yeah, a little bit. The labyrinth is one of the oldest examples of a labyrinth in Christianity history, I think, I think it's right around the same time. But there has been a Catholic church on that site since the 4th century. And of course, many iterations have happened. And just an interesting comment, the towers are Romanesque in style, not Gothic. And that was kind of really as the transition to true Gothic architecture. So the body of the church is different than the towers.
Mhm.
I just want to know how they got an asymmetric facade design past a building committee. That is a miracle in itself.
Very funny.
Yeah.
Well, I also want to thank Peggy because you did a beautiful job on the Abbey, and of course it's very special. They having a 12th century monastery about a half an hour away from you and watching it be, a dream, a vision of getting an ancient Cistercian monastery from Spain, which sat in San Francisco for 40 years. And then they had the tenacity to be able to get those stones and then to raise money for actually 50% of the stones to rebuild that and have Dave Richey, he's died since, but he was an architect that worked a lot in abbeys, and he designed the whole church with the chapter house as the center of it. And it's just a gorgeous space. It really is. It was an honor to be able to work in that.
Elizabeth, I was surprised to hear that the story of that abbey and the stones coming together was the same story that I heard about another William Randolph Hearst purchase of a Spanish cloister that's in Miami Shores, Florida.
Yeah, I think that's one of the only other 12th century monasteries in the country.
I
Yeah.
did early on in the early 2000s, I did a series of mosaics based on the capitals of the cloister of that Miami Shores monastery. And the story is kind of the same. It got shipped over. He purchased it. It got shipped over. It sat in a warehouse in New York forever. They unpacked it and they took all the hay out of it and burned it because of hoof and mouth disease going through Europe. And when they opened all the crates to burn all the hay, they totally discombobulated all the instructions and all the labels. So they basically, once somebody paid for getting it out of customs and out of a warehouse where it had been stored, they just took like the equivalent of a football field and opened every crate and laid everything out. And they managed to put the puzzle back together. And then they had all these random extra stones, which they used to build a wall of the church because they didn't know where the stones went, but they did a pretty good job of putting it all back together.
Pretty much the same story, and they had to hire a German stonemason to lay it out in one of their, it's an agricultural monastery. Actually, they do a lot of orchards and vineyards now. They have a winery there, but they had to lay all the stones out, and he figured out where the missing stones should go, and then they raised funds to do that.
That's
So,
incredible. And you can still see, I don't know if at the Cistercian Abbey, probably the same, it's of the same era. You can still see the marks of the masons who cut each stone because the only way they got paid is to put their initials in the corner of the stone so that they got, it was like the only way they could track inventory is like, I made this block of marble. And so here's my initials and I get paid for this one, and that one.
yeah.
And they set them in the cloister so that you can see the initials in the wall.
Yeah.
And if you go to the website of the Abbey of New Clairvaux, there's a lot of information and pictures of that process. And that's that. I mean, you could find it, but it's also on the slide along with Elizabeth's website. So
Great. I'm going to see if I can go there when I go to California next month.
Great.
Are they open for tours or is it all private visit only? Is it like
It is
a cloister?
open. I'm not sure if they still have tours. You'd have to probably contact, just do it on their website, I think. You would
Okay.
know.
Thank you.
Any final questions or comments for any of our presenters or the works they presented?
I want to thank Paul for putting this all together. That must have been tricky to get all these images from everybody else. Thank you, Paul.
It's one of the things working with church committees. I'm pretty good at collecting things and trying to put them into some sort of order when they don't all come in kind of the same format. But it really an honor and to look at all of these things that you've presented, Julie and Ken and Paul, Peggy, Gilbert, Todd, Lisa, Robert. I'm just amazed when we do these types of showcases, the talent and the breadth that our organization has. And thank you for volunteering to be a part of it, and for submitting and helping this be a wonderful evening of inspiration. Thank you so much.